Hello, in this video I want to talk about how to perform the internal audit. Internal audit is a mandatory requirement for the ISO 27001 and we need to have records for that. So first of all, what is an internal audit and why does it matter? The internal audit checks what works well and what needs improvement in your ISMS. So it's not a test, it's a learning activity in the continuous improvement cycle to find any gaps between the policies and what the standard says, and then what we're doing in practice so that we can close those gaps. And the findings are used in the management review to make sure that we drive the corrective actions and close the gap. An audit must be objective, so the auditor cannot audit their own work. So that means if you have a person doing the audit and this person is responsible for backups, for example, could be the IT manager, then we have to have someone else audit if backup policies are followed. So that's the principle, and that usually means that we need to have two auditors at least, and except of course if you get someone not from your company to do the internal audit for you, then it can be one person. And this happens once a year at least, and after major changes. So usually it can be helpful to make the first audit pretty simple. So in our example here, we're going to have a year one audit that has a certain way of doing that, a certain checklist. And then after year one, we're going to go into a little bit of a different cadence. So first audit. It's important to start simple so you can get practice with how to do the audit and the whole organization can get used to. This is something that happens, and to not make it too big, but just to practice the steps is really important. And also it's the purpose here is really to get a health check, a baseline of the entire ISMS, and to engage the whole organization so they learn what all this is about. That's a really big benefit of doing it this way, so go broad, but not necessarily very deep in details in every single area, but to touch upon everything. And then in later audits, we can go more in depth. But this is the purpose of the first audit, to touch on everything, but not necessarily go into very deep details with all. Okay, so preparation for an audit is to check up on the policies, so you know what's in there, and the statement of applicability, the SOA. And in your top level policies, you should have roles and responsibilities, so you know who is in charge of what area, and so you know who to talk to, who to interview. So typical way of doing an audit, it's simply to interview and ask people questions and ask them to show different types of evidence. So evidence can be something that's documented, or it can be a log inside a system, or it can be open your laptop and show me that you have antivirus installed, so that we can see that the policies are followed. And then during the audit, we're going to capture everything that we see, so the evidence, and we're going to look for both the strengths and the gaps and any risk we discover, quick wins, that can be things that can be improved to make things easier in our ISMS, and any corrective actions. So they're called findings and non-conformities in the audit report. And the output of this should be a short report, usually a spreadsheet with the checklist filled out, so our baseline, and then we can put this as an input to the management review. And here we don't go through in the management review the whole report, but we do a little summary, and that would be what we present to the management review. And we have a little template that I can show. So for year one, so you can see we have a reference. What is it we're looking for in the standard? What's the topic? And then an audit question. And then it's really helpful to go through this before the audit and think about what are you going to look for. And this is going to be a little bit dependent on your setup. Is it something you can look for in a system, in a document, as a sample on a laptop, stuff like that. So you simply prepare by reading through this and check that you understand it. And then you go into, you've already read the policies. So if there's anything specifically in a question, for example, here we're going to check if the rules in the password policy are actually followed. Then you need to check what are your specific rules in your password policy, of course. And it's really helpful to then note down here what are you actually going to check for when you check. So for example, if the policy says employees must use a password manager, we could do a sample and say, please open your laptop and show me that the password manager is installed. And then during the audit, we're going to note if it's compliant, yes, no, or partial, which you also sometimes see. And what evidence did we see? We note that. And often during an audit, you see something, so a finding, an action, an improvement for opportunity. So you just note it here. So you can put it in your final report that this is something we want to actually do something about afterwards. And then we have something called finding type. So that we have just two types here. Non-conformity is when you're not following your policy, and opportunity for improvement is when you see, well, something is actually done correct, but we can do it easier or better. So we note it as an opportunity for improvement. So that is simply how it's done. Go through these questions, decide who you're going to interview, and then you invite them for an interview and go through this list together. So that's year one, and it's a pretty short list, but it touches upon all the main areas. So you can use this checklist as a starting point. And then when you get to year two and later, we need to make sure that we cover all the requirements and all the controls of Annex A that are applicable. So that is quite a lot. So usually what most companies do is they split it up into what's called an audit program. So they just put it in smaller bites so that over time we cover everything, but not all in one go. So how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So here in this example, we have a program where we split it into 4 audits over 2 years. So we do one every 6 months, and sometimes people prefer to do only once a year, so then you can just combine it, do audit 1 and 2 in the first go, and then next year you do audit 3 and 4 together. But just make sure it's split up a little bit so it's not too big of a task. And then you might ask, well, can we not just split it over 10 years? And the answer to that is, it is not very practical to do it over too long time. It's hard to argue that your ISMS and your audit program is efficient if it's too long spread out. So a typical recommendation is to not go over a 3-year cycle, because that's also what an external audit will use. They use a 3-year cycle. So that's a pretty common thing to have 3-year cycles or 2-year or a year and a half. So anyways, so each audit has certain areas that it focuses on, and that way we also don't need to interview everybody every time, but we can focus on certain people. So this is what we do from year 2 and onwards. And then we get full coverage over time, but it's lighter and we can go a little bit more into depth. So there's a different template for this one. So you have the full program here with the 4 different audits. So there's for each one a description of what it is and what are the areas, who is the primary person to talk to interview. And here's like a summary. So first, audit 1, what are we covering? What are the specific clauses and NXA controls? So here you can see how many we're doing in each. And then for each of the 4, we have one checklist. So it's super simple to use. You just pick the checklist that you need. And then you have audit area here. And again, what is the reference, the topic, the question, and if there's a policy related, we have it here. And then we go, and this part is for the audit. We fill this out. So that should be pretty simple. And finally, a little bit about how to use the template. We already went through it. Pick the right tab, which audit you're doing. So this is for the program part, right? First year, you just focus on that. So if you're in the first year, you can skip the video now. But if you're in the audit program, then stay with me. And so pick the right tab, decide who you're going to interview for each area, and note any specific things. So when you look at each question, is there anything in your policy that you know you want to check for? Then during the audit, you ask each question one at a time, and you look at the evidence and you note whether it's compliant or not, put your notes, and what finding types you may find. After the audit, you summarize key findings and corrective actions, and you set due dates. And this summary is what you feed into the management review. So we have here for this year 1 program, we have also the summary template here where you can put your findings in and an example of what a summary can look like. So this is the one you want to update, and then you want to put your findings here. And that's it. Have fun.